This is Yair, Davidiy, speaking to you from Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. Speaking to you on behalf of Brit-Am Hebrew Nations. Our organization, Researchers for the Lost and Tribes, reveals the information to the general public and works towards reconciliation of Judah, the Jewish people, and the Lost and Tribes of Israel. These are the 3 R's of Brit-Am research: revelation, reconciliation. Now we are about to discuss the identification of Gad, of the tribe of Gad. Gad was one of the Israelite tribes. And in Genesis chapter 46 and Numbers 26 we find lists of the Israelite tribes as well as the families within the tribes. These families became clans in biblical times, in the Bible. And after the Israelites were exiled, they also became entities, historically identifiable entities in their own right. They became tribes and peoples that are found in history, and they still exist in some form or other. And these entities often have the same or very similar names to those they had in biblical times, and they show the same relationships to each other as existed in biblical times, the same federations and linkages and fraternal alliances and so on as existed in the Bible. And this helps prove, it helps confirm other evidence we have identifying the peoples in question with the Israelites. And the Israelites had disappeared. What does that mean, the Israelites had disappeared? The Israelites consisted of, after the death of King Solomon, they consisted of 2 different sections: the kingdom of Judah in the south and the kingdom of Israel in the north. They had split into 2 different sections. And the majority were in the north, and this majority comprised 10 tribes, were conquered by the Assyrians, so taken away into captivity, and they lost consciousness of their ancestry. Nevertheless, they remained together to some degree, and they recoalesced, rejoined together in different groupings, and eventually all migrated to the west. They migrated to Western Europe, and their descendants are now to be found amongst nations of Western Europe, or in the offshoots overseas, in the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. And that is where the lost in tribes are to be found in our times, and that is where we find them, and we prove it, and we have researched it, and that is what we do. And now at present we are discussing the clan of Gad, and we are not going to go in detail concerning Gad or concerning our identification with Gad. We identify Gad with the Gothics, the Goth peoples, and also with the peoples of Sweden. And we have a lot of proof for this, a lot of evidence, and at another time we will go into this in more detail. At present we're just going to give the clan names and show where the clan names were to resurface, as if to say, would appear again in historical times, and with which groups they are identifiable. Genesis 46, chapter 46 of Genesis, verse 16 tells us the sons of Gad were Ziphion, Hagi, Shuni, Etzbon, Ari, Arodi, and Areli. Numbers, the book of Numbers, chapter 26, verse 15 onwards, tells us the sons of Gad according to their families were: of Ziphion, the family of the Ziphonites; of Hagi, the family of the Haggites; of Shuni, the family of the Shunites; of Ozni, the family of the Oznites; of Eri, the family of the Erites; of Arod, the family of the Arodites; of Areli, the family of the Arielites. These are the families of the sons of Gad according to those who were numbered of them, 40,500. And Gad is a name for the Goths, an identifying root in Gad toponymy. The name Gad in biblical Hebrew could also be pronounced as Goth. We have the people, the Gothic peoples. The Gothic peoples came from Sweden, and in our opinion mainly returned to Sweden, though offshoots of them also settled in France, settled apparently in the Netherlands, in that area, and also may have joined the Anglo-Saxons in invading England. And historically they were all over the region of Russia and southern Russia, and also in the downfall of the Roman Empire. They played a significant role. They would split into 2 different sections then: the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths. They invaded France, they also invaded Spain and settled there, or at least they gave rise to other groups, other peoples were attached to them and became identified with them and received their names. It's not certain if those who eventually settled in Spain under the name of Goths were actually all of them, or what proportion of them were descended from the original Goths. There were, over the course of time, the Gothic peoples took on other other nations, other tribes who received their name. But that is another matter. At all events, the word Goth in Hebrew is similar to Gad. It could be pronounced in some circumstances the same way as Gad. Gad is GD in Hebrew. It's written as GD. The A is not there. The A sound is A. In some Hebrew dialects, it's pronounced as O. So, and the G sound is the same. The Dalet sound, the D sound has not got an accent, and so sometimes this could be pronounced as Goth. It's that, like the English TH. So we therefore have Goth. And not only that, we find in places where the Goths settled, very often the root Gad, or the name Gad, applied to different place names and so on, and this is an indication that, or a proof that the Goths had been in that region. Something that accompanies the presence of the Goths is a giving of names with Gad in its root. So this shows a linkage to Gad, and this in itself is important. It's important to notice. Another name for the Goths was the Gudas, similar to Gad. The Davidiy were also a Gothic group in the Balkans. They too were descended from Gad. They were also found in the same name in Scandinavia. The Davidiy participated in Anglo-Saxon invasions of England, and they also joined the Daci, and went north into Denmark, and also participated in Anglo-Saxon invasions of the British Isles. We also have the name Guti. Guti was also a name given to Goths both in Scandinavia and east of the Caspian and Scythia, and also in the Middle East. In ancient times, when the Guti, the Gemiri, and the Sakai were together in one group, collectively known as the Cimmerians, and it was to this group with which Israelite exiles were identified, or amalgamated, federated with. Israelite exiles, at all events, were to be amongst this group, this Cimmerian group, and they were apparently the dominant entity there, became the dominant portion of this federation. And we have shown elsewhere how we can prove that this federation comprised to a significant degree the Israelite tribes who were in exile in the Syrian Empire, which broke up shortly afterwards, and the Goths and the Scythians and so on took over for a while, until they were defeated or betrayed and pushed out to the south, and went to the north, to the southern area of what is now Russia, and all that area is later known as Scythia. Also the Guthungs, another portion of the Goths on the Baltic coast, and the Gotai in Scandinavia, and in Iran, which is present day Iran and Persia. We had the area of Gadrosia, which was also apparently a region where the Israelites were settled. When the Israelites were taken into captivity, one of the areas they were taken into captivity is termed the cities of the Medes. And these included areas which are now in present-day Iran. But these Israelites also moved out from this region. Incidentally, also included areas on the border of Afghanistan, or in Afghanistan itself. But when the Israelites were pushed out of this region, or moved out of this region, they went to the north, went to Scythia and what is the former USSR, and from that region they moved westward into West Europe and the British Isles. We also had the Pasagadai in the Pahlavi, the Pahlavi language, which is a language spoken by the Parthian rulers of Iran later. The word name Pasagadoi means sons of Gad. And the Pasagadoi were the clan from which the Achaemenid rulers of Persia emerged. We're not saying that these rulers Cyrus, Darius and so on, were descendants of Israelites, but there may have been some connection, and we have discussed this matter elsewhere. In ancient Afghanistan, we had the Tatagids, which are considered, or at one stage were considered a combination of Teutons and Goths, or Gads, Gids meaning Goths. We identify Thata, or the Teutons, with Tahan from Ephraim, and the Gids with Gad, there was a combination of Gad and Ephraim in this region, and these peoples also later traceable to the west. The peoples who moved westward. We have another name is the Gadeni in Scotland, who may also be descendant from the Goths, though Gideon or Benjamin or Gideon or Manasseh are also possibilities. In ancient Scotland and Ireland with the Gadhel, who also may have been related to Gad, or the name may have another meaning. They had the Gedingas that were a group amongst Anglo-Saxon invaders of England. And now we get to the clans of Gad. We had Zipion. Zipion became the Thay Valley, and these were allies of the Goths who from Scythia moved westward, eventually reaching France. We have Hagi. Hagi was the name of the Franks, but we identify the Franks with Reuben. Nevertheless, in the land of Israel, Reuben and Gad had been neighbours, had adjoined each other. They had dwelt east of the Jordan. They had been neighbouring, adjoining one to each other, and they interlocked with each other, intermerged with each other to some degree, so that the same identifications, overlapping identifications are explainable. And Hagi of Gath became known as the Hugi in Scythia, and they later moved westwards, and the name was given to the Franks, and they moved into France. And also we have Yngling in Sweden, and the Korki in Ireland, as well as in Scandinavia, and the Korka land, and we have also the Huguenots in France. Huguenots in France received their name because popular legend associated them with a ghost or some mythical creature called Hugo. And Hugo isn't actually a name, it was a name similar to Hagi. And Huguenots in France were an important element. They were persecuted, but a lot of great people emerged from offshoots of the Huguenots. Many of the Huguenots migrated to Canada and to the USA and to other areas, and they may well have been ethnically distinct from the rest of the French, and very often we find them in France. They are found in areas where the Goths had settled. And also there was an input from Jews who had been forced to become Christians, who also contributed to the Huguenot being, Huguenot body. And this is interesting. We have in Sweden we have the Sevua, the Suions, as they are called in Tacitus, in the history of Tacitus. And they relate to the Shuni from the Gad, the clan of Shuni from Gad. In biblical Hebrew or North Israelite Hebrew, Shuni could be pronounced as Suni or Suoni, which is the same as one of the pronunciations, or one of the names given to the Sebia, the Sevuia, who were in Sweden, and they were one of the major bodies of Sweden. They actually gave the name Sweden. The name Sweden derives from the Svea. The Svea were one of the two major bodies. The other body was the Goths. When the Svea and the Goths united, they created the kingdom of Sweden. The Svea were also known as Suions, which is similar to biblical pronunciations of Shuni, a major clan of Gad. So this is how we identify them. We also have Etzborn, a clan of Gad, who became the Bastonai, who were a group of Goths, who were associated with the Goths, and moved to France. And also the Hastings and the Hastings. Hastings and Hastings are in effect the same group, or different names for the same group. They were part of the Vandals. The Vandals were allies of the Goths, associated with the Goths, migrated with the Goths, and they also invaded England and Scotland, and contributed to the population there. They were part of the Anglo-Saxon invasions. When the Anglo-Saxons and the Jutes invaded England, a lot of other groups joined them, were attached to them, as listed in Bede and in other sources. And so one of these groups, as we have shown in our book, The Tribes, incidentally this book, The Tribes, our work, The Tribes, gives all the details on what we are speaking about. It gives historical references. It gives more proofs, very detailed proofs from a lot of different sources, from biblical sources, rabbinical sources, archaeological sources, historiographical sources, historical writings, legends, mythology, linguistics, and every source that is somehow or other pertinent. We have shown that all of the evidence points in the same direction and helps us identify certain groups with the Israelite tribes. And a good portion of this evidence is to be found in this book in detail, or at least in summarized form, in this work. And this work is very important, and we very much recommend that you purchase this work and will get hold of it somehow or other and read it, because the information is extremely valuable. Thank you. Remember, the tribes, the Israelite origins of Western peoples, by Yair Davidiy, that is my humble self, and I am recommending this work because it really is worth reading. Another group of the clans of Gad were the Ozni. The Ozni were, the name Ozni is recorded in Osnabrück in Germany, Frankish Germany, where the Franks were, and they later moved to France. And some may have remained in Germany. From Germany came a lot of the immigrants from Germany went to the USA, and they become an important element in the population of the USA. We've shown elsewhere that those people from Germany who migrated to the USA in the 1700s and 1800s were different from the Germans who remained behind. Germany was always a mixture of peoples. Many of the Israelite groups had moved through Germany at some stage or other, but there were other peoples there from other non-Israelite origins, and the Israelites had settled amongst them, had not intermixed. Intermixture in Germany was very stratified. One group could not take a woman from another group without losing tribal status, and there was a whole caste type of system, and some groups would settle alongside others and hardly even intermix with them. The intermixture must have taken place, but it wasn't as great as we would assume, was not as great as it could have been compared to modern parallels. Most peoples lived in their own area. Most peoples only married within a few kilometers of their place of residence. So most peoples more or less stayed together. And when they moved out of Germany, there were some peoples, some villages, the whole village would all pick themselves up and leave, whereas the neighbouring village would all stay behind. And those who left were different from those who stayed behind, as different studies have shown. They were physically different, sociologically different in their attitudes, political and religious attitudes. They were different. And we believe that they were racially, as if to say, ethnically different. And this principle applies to other portions of Europe as well. Returning to the clans of Gad, we have the Yair, the Granny, the Griotingi Goths in Sweden. All of these peoples derive from Yair. Yair in Hebrew is an iron, and this iron could sometimes take a g sound, so therefore we get Granny, Griotingi, and so on from this name. Yair could be Geri in the same way as we have Azza, the city of Azza, in the Palestinian, so-called Palestinian city of Azza, in the southeast of the state of Israel. Azza, in English, is written as Gaza, because that is similar to how the iron sound is actually pronounced by the Arabs and by Semitic peoples. Another portion of the Gad was the clan of Arodi. Arodi. Ha in Hebrew means the. So Arodi could also be Harodi. And so too we have in Scandinavia, especially in Norway, we have had the Harudi, also known as Arudi, or Arodi. So this is almost exactly the same name for this group. The Arodi became the Harudi in Scandinavia, especially in Norway. And also had the Hedgroths in Scandinavia in general. Hedgroths also derived from Arodi. Similarly, we have the Areli, which was a clan of Goths, Areli, which could also be the Ha-Uruli, Ha-Areli, meaning the Areli, became the Uruli, also known in Scandinavia as the Herals, which is the same Ha, the first letter Har, or first sound Ha, similar to the Hebrew the, which is above Eruli, they were known as Herals. It's almost the same name as Ariel. It is actually the same name. It is a simpler, almost a very, very subtle distinction, difference in the pronunciation. These names are the same, and these names were to be found in Scandinavia, especially in Sweden, and associated with the Goths. Another group with the Guni. Guni became associated with the Goths, the Huns. Amongst the Hunnish people, so-called Hunnish nations, there were a whole group of different people. Some of them were of various racial origins, Some of them were European in type, others were Mongoloid. Some of them were very European in type, and amongst these we find invaders of Scandinavia. And these included the Huni, or derived from Guni, and they're associated with the Huns. And so too we have the Nephthalite Huns. The Nephthalite Huns were from the tribe of Naphtali, and they were associated with the Huns, and they invaded Scandinavia and settled in Norway, as we will discuss elsewhere. So we see that overall, the Gad and the clans of Gad all gave rise to different groups, very important historical groups who we know about, those who read history of the Roman Empire, the breakdown of the Roman Empire, also Asian history. Find these names repeated, very similar names to those of the tribes of Gad are found in European history, and most of these groups either came from Scandinavia or they settled later in Scandinavia, are to be found primarily in Scandinavia, and Sweden especially merited to receive settlers from the tribe of Gad, and due to this and other evidence which we have, that much of which is given in this book, The Tribes, we show that Sweden today is to be identified with the tribe of Gad. Thank you. May the Lord God of Israel bless all of you.